The Afterword is announcing our first business partnership. This episode has been sponsored by Fiction Addiction, which is Greenville, South Carolina's very own independent bookstore. This shop is where you can get terrific books, personal service, and a chance to meet your favorite authors in person. Fiction Addiction is located behind Haywood Mall and on the web at fiction-addiction.com.
You know what, Holland? Writing is one of the most complicated forms of communication. Creating a written project is often elusive, recursive, difficult.
You have to tell me what the word recursive means.
It just means that you're just in a circle. You just don't stop.
Okay.
And there are days when cleaning a toilet sounds much more satisfying to me than trying to put words on a page. Not only is it a matter of focus, it becomes a problem of know-how. In 2016, the National Commission on Writing found that high-end blue-chip businesses were spending $3.1 billion on remedial writing for their employees annually.
Oh, I can believe that. I contract with businesses to write material for them because they don't do it themselves.
Exactly.
And it's not a matter of not knowing grammar or not having the vocabulary to do it. It's a matter of being able to piece together something that communicates a message to an audience. Mm-hmm. The International Literacy Association posted a cover article for their 2017 literacy magazine. It was called Building a Culture of Literacy. And it said, when literacy is infused into every part of a school's environment, teachers are demonstrating their own connections to books and creating opportunities in and out of the classroom for students to use their skills and expand their interests.
So how can we reconcile this? Because we've got the demands of workplace and then what is taught in the school, and then the big question of why is writing such a non-preferred task to so many? And how do stories give access and connect interests into new areas of thinking and break through the barriers of social norms?
Or what does a culture of literacy look like? And how can young authors impact the future of words in the generations that follow? To help us answer these questions, we have brought to the table tonight Andre Sullivan and Adrienne Burris. Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. Adrienne is the executive director of Greenville Wordsmiths and the arms writing instructor at the Fine Arts Center. She has degrees from Clemson University and Goldsmiths University of London, where she earned a master's in writing and teaching. Adrienne is also a Moth StorySlam winner, a 2-time TEDx presenter, and the fiction editor of Emry's Journal. So what are you working on currently?
Oh my gosh, what am I not working on right now? Well, the school year just started. So right now I'm pretty much all in on teaching and getting my little baby writers all set up to have a successful year. And I also just finished judging a young authors writing contest that Emrys co-sponsors with Read Up, which is a local young adult book festival. And we're going to be announcing the winners of that in about a month. So that's my big project right now as well.
Excellent. Yeah. That sounds like fun. Mm-hmm. Well, Andre is a young best-selling author, I believe 27 years old, illustrator, motivational speaker from Greenville, South Carolina. He recently co-founded a nonprofit called Young Brothers Academy, along with Justice Cox and Braylon Jones. He hopes to take his message of connectedness to a global audience, showing everyone that we all have an individual power, but we are truly super powerful when we come together. He has been awarded the Creative Brilliance Award by TV, film, and Broadway actress Cee-Cee Michaela Floyd, been featured on 98.3 The Block as a Black history maker, as well as Upstate Parent magazine. So, Andre, tell us a little bit of some of the projects you're working on.
Well, we actually just had taken in our next cohort of young men for Young Brothers Academy, so we are now at 20, which is amazing. We actually just accepted a new director who will be helping us as a mentor. And I just partnered with WGGS to produce a show called Sullivan Company, which will be a children's television show piecing together a lot of the nostalgia that we had as children coming up Sesame Street, reading Rainbow, and just smashing that all together and making it a little more modern. So I'm really, really, really excited about that.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we have some of that information on our website as well, because that sounds like a lot of fun.
That sounds like fun.
I want to watch that show.
I'm really excited. So great.
Awesome.
Well, tell us, Andre, how did you get into writing?
I've always written short stories, and I've always drawn a lot. Like, I would get the reams of paper when I was a kid going to school, and I would draw that up in like 2 weeks, and my mom would be so mad. So I just take all that time to just really try to develop characters and develop stories. And I'd written a comic book when I was 10, and I tried to give it to my cousin Valerie because she had just released a children's book. And so I was so inspired because I'd never known anyone to do anything like this, let alone someone in my family. So I bugged her constantly. I'm just like, hey, I have this idea, and I really want for you to see it. And she sat me down one day and she said, you know, if you can really come up with a concept and a character that you believe in, that you would be willing to carry out to the world and try to introduce this character, she said, then I would get behind you and I'd help you. And years and years and years had passed, and I was, you know, in school, and I recently lost a friend of mine. So I was just dealing with a lot of stuff in school, and I was trying to find a way to get that out. So my art has always been an outlet for me to express myself. But I know that I'd always wanted to write a book, and just, you know, the social injustice issue was just at a peak at the times. And I'm always trying to involve myself in community and just trying to make myself available to my community because I know it's extremely important. So I wanted to be able to give back. So I wanted to use that social injustice issue to be able to put something that I've always known that I wanted to do just together. And I felt like it was the perfect time to go ahead and start to get the stories out. So opportunity and timing is what really got me into writing.
What about you, Adrienne?
Oh, I really agree with Andre. Writing was something that always came really easily to me. My mom, in our memory chest at our house, still has all of these staple bound little books that I made when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. There's a particular one I remember. It's about Santa getting like stuck in the chimney and he leaves his boot behind and I have to go return his boot. And yes,
Cinderella's Santa story.
Yes, it is. But she's kept all of these things. And I feel really fortunate that I had parents who were just so supportive of that from a very, very young age and helping me just flourish in that area. But as I got older, I realized that a lot of people see writing as a real challenge and it can be very, very difficult. And I see that with a lot of kids I work with now, many of whom have special educational needs or learning differences. Writing is physically so hard for them. But what's happening is there's this disparity where when writing is hard, you might think, oh, well, my story's not worth telling. Mm-hmm. And you have to sort of bridge that gap between, okay, just because writing is hard doesn't mean your story's not valid, and figuring out ways to help these kids get their stories across so they can feel that same type of joy I've felt my whole life from putting my stories out there.
I love that.
I do too. We have a mom theme already going on. Both people have mentioned my mom. Either she got mad or she saved my stories or something.
I love that.
Beginning.
I love that. I know you both have some interest in working with young people and that kind of thing. And I think that's just so admirable to take this form of art, this creative outlet. I know one time I used to think, well, I'm not artistic because I can't draw. I completely disregarded the idea of writing and words being art. Mm-hmm. And so now I realize, oh, wait a minute. I am artistic. It's just not making pictures. I have words, and that's a good thing too. And one of the things I think that's so important, and I think you touched a little bit on it, Adrian, is talking about writing a good story, coming from writing with what we know. So we can maybe flip that question and say, what can I know? So Andre, I'm going to point this question to you first. What advantages do young voices have when it comes to thinking out of the box, pushing the envelope, and dreaming the impossible?
Honestly, I feel like they have every opportunity available to them. With young people coming up now, it's like they grew up with the internet. I grew up with the internet too, but I'm like, not like they grew up with the internet. And just the vast amount of resources, the counsel that they're able to seek. I reach out to people who are in different fields all the time just to hear about their work ethic. That's amazing. So, I mean, if young people, you know, would just take account of just the resources that are available to them, they'll see that nothing's, you know, impossible. And I love to tell children that, you know, nothing's impossible. It only needs to be done. So I love to just scream that out all the time. Just, everything that's available to them right now.
That's great. I love that. How about you, Adrienne?
I mean, I totally agree again with Andre. And also just thinking about not just this particular generation of young people, but any generation of young people, particularly I would say the younger middle schoolers I work with, they have no filter, right? They're not worried about being cool yet. They're just sort of putting their ideas out into the world and seeing what sticks, and pretty much every class I teach at the Fine Arts Center, I'm having to beg the kids to stop writing so I can go home. I'm like, I need to go home and eat dinner. I want to see my son. And they just get so excited. And they don't care what anyone's going to think about it. They don't care if it's already been done. They're like, well, I'm going to do it in my own way. They have none of that burden that maybe some adults would carry when it comes to their writing, which is so refreshing for me. And it encourages me to be more experimental and take more risks, just seeing the way they just go in with their whole selves into it.
I love that. That's awesome.
There are a lot of resources available through the internet. I just to go back to what you were saying earlier, Andre, because we wouldn't have this podcast, not only because we would have no place to put it, but because all of the people that we've had as guests, except for the few that we knew personally in advance, we've found them online, right? We've communicated through email and Facebook, and the unseen guests who listen to these conversations and who presumably get something out of it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hear about it unless it was through this. So there really are a lot of available resources for people. It's knowing where to find them, I think, and then how to start sorting through them and find ways to use them. Anyway, I was reading this story not too long ago. It was about a man named Louis Michaud. He passed away in 1976. He owned a bookstore, and his bookstore was known as an intellectual haven. He promoted the voices of writers, and he urged others to read about their heritage, particularly people with an African heritage. And over time, his inventory expanded from 5 books to more than 200,000 in 44 years. He notably said, "The way to hide something from the black man is to put it in a book." We talked about this already a little bit with Glennis and Tyson Wright. But I'd like to hear what you have to say about this too, Andre. What are some of the keys to empowering and motivating and encouraging literacy in younger generations, and maybe particularly younger generations from communities that have not historically valued words and the art of words?
I actually read up on Mr. Lewis. I know he used to be an advisor to Malcolm X, and I know that he's really into Marcus Garvey. And I really enjoy Marcus Garvey and some of his teachings as well. As far as empowerment, it goes into representation. I think it's the lack of visual representation, or just the lack of representation in general in film, television, literature, that you want to feel and you want to see yourself in the stories and the things that you see and you read. So my whole thing is you're only able to work inside your circle of influence. If I'm able to grow my influence to the point that I'm able to reach everybody, it transcends race, it transcends, cultural class, social class, whatever you're looking at in life. And it goes back into that representation. So I look at entertainment as that medium. I'm going to try to tap into as many different outlets and as many different mediums as I can, because that's going to show one representation that's going to show that, hey, this young man, not much older than myself, is out here able to do, all of these things. Well, why not me? And, it's having or seeing that visual representation that, you want to go back and try to mimic or try to get as close to. Like I have tons and tons and tons of heroes that I've always watched in television and film and in literature as well. But, they may not necessarily be black or, have an African-American heritage, but I connected with them. I connected with their stories, and I connected with the way that they're able to tell a story. And it's in that I was able to see myself. So going back to representation. So I feel like the more that we're able to represent ourselves as African Americans, whether it be in film or in literature or television, the more that we're going to be able to see that return. Kids are going to be able to see themselves in that programming or that literature and want to do that. I think visual representation as far as African Americans have only risen 5% in the last 25 years. And that's saying something. So I feel like the more that we're able to put ourselves in these positions or find ourselves in these positions to elevate one another, be able to see their representation. And that lack of knowledge won't be such a stigma on the community because we'll be able to use those resources to push forward. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Are there particular books or movies or plays or board games that you recommend to people that you feel are good representations, good visual representations?
I really enjoy, and it's only because I had to perform it when I had done forensics, Fences by August Wilson. I really enjoyed the story. And then granted, I know it's a period piece like back then, but that story is pretty much timeless. It's the struggle of an American family trying to find their footing in a time period that wasn't great for necessarily anybody, but it's trying to find that common ground so that we're able to, continue to relate to the world and find that greater meaning, I guess, even if in the end we are our own demise. But it's trying to find that common ground. I really enjoy Fences by August Wilson. And I'm more of a fan of comedians, but more fans of, comedians in their life story. So I like hearing a lot of their upbringing. Like, I think that Eddie Murphy's story, as he was coming up, was amazing. Nobody in his family thinking that he was funny at all until, he just started to, be persistent and go out to these comedy clubs and find his footing, find that common ground with people and let that be his mark. And Saturday Night Live and on, it was just, we haven't seen a star like Eddie Murphy since. And so, it's just, looking to those things in the past and trying to find that way forward.
Thank you. And I could see you tapping your fingers and getting all excited across the table.
Yes, I have so many thoughts on this. So my son is Black. We adopted him. And finding resources that speak to him is just like a huge personal mission of mine. And then it extends just into my job as an educator. I'm always looking for more representative text. So I wanted to add to the list he provided, like Jason Reynolds, Kwame Alexander, Danielle Clayton. Something that's amazing about, I guess, what we would call diverse authors is that historically there's been this idea that, okay, if it's a Black author, they're writing these texts about slavery and about civil rights. And now what we're seeing is that does not have to be the case. We're going to have fantasy authors who are Black and are writing fantasy stories that don't have to necessarily touch on the Black experience as it is socially, but can just be a fantasy author and an extremely talented one, and it doesn't have to be as much of a deal, in quotes, for us to have a Black fantasy author, a Black science fiction author. It's just, they're authors, and they're producing these texts and they're giving us very rich body of work with so many amazing characters in it. And it's a very exciting time for particularly YA novels and things like that right now. But in addition to the representation, I think expectation is really big, and making sure that all the children we're serving have equally high expectations placed on them for what they can produce, what they can accomplish, what we're hoping to get from them, as young writers and storytellers, and not saying, oh, because you have this background or this going on in your family at home, we're going to lower that expectation for you. We never do that. Always keep those expectations high. And sometimes kids get mad at me and they fuss at me a little bit. I'm sure, Andre, you faced this. But no, I'm not going to let up on them because they are capable. They are capable.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. We've talked on several episodes about this idea of having windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors. And, we need books that give us all three of those opportunities. And so I really appreciate just this conversation that a story is a story. But we want to have that representation. We want to celebrate the fact that we do have these amazing authors that are coming, and we're giving a platform. I want to have that expectation of a platform for any kind of diversity. When we had Natalie Perkins and being able to talk about her story, Crossing Borders, the common theme is that it's a good story. And we all have a story to tell. So that's wonderful. So Adrienne, since you are definitely in the world of teaching right now, how do you tell stories that are impactful, inspiring, creative, beyond a formula? Because I think teachers, we love a formula. Let's do the cheeseburger method. You start with the bottom bun and you've got the meat, and filling, and then we have the top bun, and that's your 5-paragraph story, right? We love these formulas. So how do we get out of that?
Well, I think there is a lot of importance to, the formula. For some reason, right now, sometimes I feel teaching falls into two camps. It's either, we teach the grammar and we teach this, or they write whatever they want. And I think people automatically assume, oh, Adrian, she's in that, let them go, whatever. And I am, but to a point. I think my approach to teaching writing is to first and foremost to get buy-in from the students, because if I don't have buy-in from the students, I'm getting absolutely nowhere. And so I do give them a lot of freedom to write literally whatever they want. Literally whatever they want. So if that means I have 4th graders writing 20 pages on this dragon who is powered by roller skates that run on slime that they've made, and he lives in a cave that's filled with Twix bars, and I don't, it gets crazier than that. But whatever they want to create, I let them just run with it as far as they want, and I don't worry about if it makes sense. But then once they've got something they're really hyped up about, I can start sneaking in, okay, well, if you really care about this story, now let's get into thinking about the structure a little bit more and talking to them about that dragon or monster on roller skates like it's freaking Jane Eyre, right? I'm going to treat whatever crazy character they create like it is the next great American novel, and we're going to structure it that way and treat them as a fellow author and not just as a little kid to whom I'm imparting knowledge from the top down.
I love that. How about you, Andre? What do you do when you're working with some of your young men?
I actually agree with Adrian. I love the method from time to time, and there's definitely something to it. But we just try to take the conversational approach. We want them to feel like it's a safe place. When it comes to Young Brothers Academy, like we've actually had, young men to deal with certain situations at home, running away, things to that extent. And, they have those times where they don't feel comfortable with talking to their parents or even their older siblings. So we want to try to be able to fill that space for them. So trying to create that comfortability is that consistent reaching out. We call it teachers. We call it parents. We want to be as involved in their lives as someone in their family would be, so that when they are having these tough times and they are feeling like they're trapped or don't have anyone to talk to, that they'll see us as like, well, they're not necessarily my family, but they're always there. So we definitely want to try to create that safe space. So having those conversations and asking how we can be there for them is super important for us. That's something that's really at the foundation of what we do.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I think what I'm hearing too, it's just there's a balance between having formulas, having structure, and within that, there is some safety. When you know how far you can go with something. I had a student and he was writing this mystery and he was describing the sound in the basement, and all of a sudden his best friend is in the room. And I looked at him and I said, "How did she get in your room? This is in the middle of the night." And he starts laughing, and it was humorous. It was funny, but he was like, "Oh yeah, I guess it's going to need to be the next day." And so when you put that boundary in for a writer, sometimes that does give them that safety and allows for that creativity and gives them some direction. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we started off talking about how blue chip businesses are spending $3.1 billion annually on remedial writing for their employees. So however we were teaching writing 20, 30, and 40 years ago, can we agree it didn't work? So we need to think about foundationally, to borrow your word, Andre, what we're doing when we teach writing. And I don't know how people were taught. Well, I guess I do know how people were taught to write 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's when I was in school. But if that was the hamburger method, maybe it deserves a review, and a little more thinking about that. All right. What would you say is an essential component that we need to include about giving access to young voices, Adrienne?
The young voices. That's
kind of essential.
I think that's the most important thing, is to actually talk to the kids about their interest and their fears and what they don't like doing and what they like doing and what's hard for them and what's not hard for them. and building it together. Because again, I reiterate, it has to be a collaborative sort of knowledge building experience. It can't just be me deciding what the kids need and then slamming it down and telling them they have to learn it. It's something you've got to work on together. So I think just the young voices themselves and making sure that you're actually listening and not just giving them questions and them answering and then still doing whatever it is you were planning to do to begin with. Yeah. Right?
Wow, that's good.
What do you think, Andre?
Definitely agree with Adrian on that point. You want to make sure that you're having these conversations with the kids. And something that's really important is, and this is just personally, finding that balance between lazy and uninspired. That's something that's really, really important because a lot of kids out here are not lazy. They just haven't had that spark to just hit them and find that creativity. So keep them ever interested in whatever they're doing, you know.
Wow, I definitely appreciate that. My grandfather used to talk about that as an educator, it is our job to help find that spark, to help illuminate that opportunity for our students, because every child has a spark. Everyone has that opportunity. They might have been snuffed out of bed and kind of crushed, but everyone has that. So that's a great word. Well, we want to thank Adrienne and Andre, but a special thanks to Fiction Addiction in Greenville, South Carolina for their generous partnership of today's episode. And a big thank you to our digital director, Jonathan Munro, who helps with all of the details in recording our podcast. So thank you. So this concludes the first part of our conversation. Tune in next week as we continue to talk with them about what characteristics support the development of young voices and what social media is doing to help get their word out to the world. How do we use criticism as a catalyst for creativity, and what can we do to become a world of writers? Thank you for joining us here at the Afterword. We look forward to having you next time.